Hey Ruby, you ready for a story? Ruby's ready. Hey, it's Maria from Still Dreaming Homestead. Glad to be back with you. I've taken a few days off, I know. Just been having some things to do. But tonight we're going back on reading our book, Farmer Boy by Laura Ingalls Wilder. And today's chapter is called Summertime. The sunshine was getting hotter now, and all the green things grew quickly. The corn thrust its rustling narrow leaves waist high. Father plowed it again, and Royal and Monzo hoed it again. So Father did the big long lines in between the rows of corn, and then Monzo and Royal took out the weeds between the corn that's in the row. Then the corn was laid by. It had gained so much advantage against the weeds that it could hold the field with no more help. They wouldn't have to plow it or anything. The bushy rows of potatoes almost touched, and their white blossoms were like foam on the field. The oats rippled gray-green, and the wheat's thin heads were rough with young husks where the kernels would grow. The meadows were rosy purple with blossoms that the bees loved best. Work was not so pressing now. Monzo had time to weed the garden and hoe the row of potatoes he was raising from seed. He had planted a few potato seeds just to see what they would do. And every morning he fed his pumpkin that he was growing for the county fair. Have you ever heard of feeding a pumpkin? I'm going to tell you about it. Father had shown him how to raise a milk-fed pumpkin. They had picked out the best vine in the whole field and snipped off all the branches but one, and all the yellow pumpkin blossoms but one. Then between the root and the wee green pumpkin, they carefully made a slit on the underside of the vine. Under the slit, Monzo made a hollow in the ground and set a bowl of milk in it. Then he put a candle wick in the milk, and the end of the candle wick he put carefully into the slit. Every day the pumpkin vine drank up the bowl full of milk through the candle wick, and the pumpkin was growing enormous. Already it was 3 times as big as other pumpkins in the field. Monzo had his own little pig too. He had bought her with his $50, and she was so small when he first got her that he had to dip a rag in the milk, and then she would suck it off that rag. That'd be cute to see. But soon she learned how to drink. He kept her in a pen in the shade, because young pigs grow best in the shade, and he fed her all she could eat. She was growing fast too. So was Monzo, but he was not growing fast enough. He drank all the milk he could hold, and at meal times he filled his plate so full that he could not eat all of it. Father looked stern because he had left food in his plate, and he asked, "What's the matter, son? Your eyes bigger than your stomach?" Then Monzo tried to swallow a little more. He did not tell anyone he was trying to grow up faster so that he could break the colts. Every day, Father took the 2-year-olds out, one by one on a long rope, and trained them to start and stop when he spoke. He trained them to wear bridles and harnesses, and not to be afraid of anything. Pretty soon he would hitch up each one with the gentle old horse and teach them to pull a light cart behind it without being scared. But he wouldn't let Monzo even go into the barnyard when he was training them. Monzo was sure he wouldn't frighten them. He wouldn't teach them to jump or balk or try to run away. But Father wouldn't trust a 9-year-old. That year, Beauty had the prettiest colt. it's a baby horse, that Almanzo had ever seen. He had a perfect star on his forehead, and Almanzo named him Starlight. He ran in the pasture with his mother, and once when Father was in town, Almanzo went into the pasture. Beauty lifted her head and watched him coming, and the little colt ran behind her. Almanzo stopped and stood perfectly still. After a while, Starlight peeked at him under Beauty's neck. Almanzo didn't move. Little by little, the colt stretched its neck towards Almanzo, looking at him with wandering, wide eyes. Beauty nuzzled him back and switched her tail, and she took a step and bit off a clump of grass. Starlight stood trembling, looking at Almanzo. Beauty watched them both, chewing calmly. The colt made one step and then another. He was so near that Almanzo could almost touch him, but he didn't. Starlight came a step closer. Almanzo didn't even breathe. Suddenly the colt turned and ran back to his mother. Almanzo heard Elijah Jane yelling, "Manzo!" She had seen him. That night she told Father. Almanzo said he hadn't done a thing. Honest, he hadn't, but Father said, "Let me catch you fooling with that colt again, and I'll tan your jacket. That's too good a colt to be spoiled. I won't have you teaching it tricks that I must train out of it." Summer days were long, hot now, and Mother said this was good growing weather. But Almanzo felt that everything was growing but him. Day after day he went by and nothing seemed to change. Almanzo weeded and hoed the garden. He helped mend the stone fences. He chopped wood and did the chores. In the hot afternoons, when there wasn't much to do, he went swimming. Sometimes he woke in the morning and heard rain drumming on the roof. That meant he and Father might go fishing. He didn't dare speak to Father about fishing because it was wrong to waste time in idleness. Idleness is not doing things, like doing work. Even on rainy days, there was plenty to do. Father might mend harnesses, or sharpen tools, or shave shingles. Silently, Almanzo ate breakfast, knowing that his father was struggling against temptation. He was afraid that Father's conscience would win. "Well, what are you going to do today?" Mother would ask. Father might answer slowly, "I did lay out to cultivate the carrots and mend the fence. Can't do that in this rain?" "No," Father would say. After breakfast, he would stand looking at the falling rain till at last he would say, "Well, it's too wet to work outdoors. What say we go fishing, Almanzo?" And Almanzo ran to get the hoe and the bait, and he dug worms to put in the bait can. The rain drummed on his old straw hat. It ran down his arms and back, and the mud squeezed cool between his toes. Oh, he wasn't wearing any shoes. He was already sopping wet when he and his father took their rods and went down across the pasture to Trout River. Nothing ever smelled so good as rain on clover. Nothing ever felt as good as raindrops on Almanzo's face and the wet grass swishing around his legs. And nothing ever sounded so pleasant as the drops pattering on the bushes along Trout River and the rush of the water over the rocks. They stole quietly along the bank, not making a sound, and they dropped their hooks into the pool. Father stood under a hemlock tree, and Almanzo sat under a tent of cedar boughs and watched the raindrops dimpling the water. Suddenly he saw a flash in the air. Father had hooked a trout. It slithered and gleamed through the falling rain as Father flipped it into the grassy bank. Almanzo jumped up and remembered just in time not to shout. Then he felt a tug at his line. The tip of his rod bent almost to the water, and he jerked it upward with all of his might. A shimmering big fish came up on the end of his line. It struggled and slipped in his wet hands, but he got it off the hook. A beautiful speckled trout, even larger than Father's. He held it up for Father to see. Then he baited his hook and flung out his line again. Fish always bite well when raindrops are falling on the river. Father got one, then Almanzo got two. Then Father pulled out two more, and Almanzo got one even bigger than the first. Father admired Almanzo's, and Almanzo admired Father's, and they tramped home through the clover in the rain. They were so wet they couldn't even get any wetter, and their skins were glowing warm. Out in the rain by the chopping block at the woodpile, they cut off the heads of the fish and scraped off the silvery scales, and they cut the fish open and stripped out their insides. The big milk pan was full of trout, and Mother dipped them in cornmeal and fried them for dinner. Now, this afternoon, Almanzo can help me churn, said Mother. The cows were giving so much milk that churning must be done twice a week. Now that's when they're making butter. Almanzo and the girls were tired of churning, and on rainy days, Almanzo had to do it. And I'm going to show you how it looked when he was churning. You see that picture? The cream would go in that, and he would rock it. In the whitewashed cellar, the big wooden barrel churn stood on wooden legs, half full of cream. Almanzo turned the handle and the churn rocked. Inside, the cream went chug, splash, chug, splash. Almanzo had to keep rocking the churn till the chugging broke the cream into grains of butter swimming in buttermilk. Then Almanzo drank a mud of acid, creamy buttermilk and ate cookies, while Mother skimmed out the grainy butter and washed it in the round wooden butter bowl. She washed every bit of buttermilk out of it, and she salted it and packed the firm golden butter in butter tubs. And see, if they left more of the buttermilk in it, it wouldn't last so long. Fishing wasn't the only summer fun. Some July evenings, Father would say, "All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. Tomorrow we go berrying." Almanzo didn't say anything, but inside he was all one joyful yell. Before dawn, the next day, they were all riding away on the lumber wagon, wearing their oldest clothes and taking pails and bushel baskets and a big picnic lunch. They drove far into the mountains near Lake Chattagay, where the wild huckleberries and blueberries grew. The woods were full of other wagons and other families also berrying. They laughed and sang, and all among the trees you could hear them talking. Every year they all met friends here that they didn't see any other time. But all of them were busy picking berries. They talked while they worked. The leafy low bushes covered the ground in open spaces among the trees. Blackberries clustered thickly under the leaves, and there was a syrupy smell in the hot, still sunshine. Birds had come to feast in the berry patches. The air was aflutter with wings, and angry blue jays flew scolding at the heads of the pickers. Once, 2 blue jays attacked Alice's sunbonnet, and Almanzo had to beat them off. And once, he was picking by himself, and behind a cedar tree, he met a black bear. The bear was standing on his hind legs, stuffing berries in his mouth with both furry paws. Almanzo stood stock still. So did the bear. Almanzo stared, and the bear stared back at him with little scared eyes above his motionless paws. Then the bear dropped on all fours and ran waddling into the woods. At noon, the picnic baskets were opened by a spring, and all around in the cool shade, people ate and talked. Then they drank at the spring and went back to the berry patches. Early in the afternoon, the bushel baskets and all the pails were full, and Father drove home. They were all a little sleepy, soaked in sunshine and breathing the fruity smells of berries. For days, Mother and the girls had made jellies and jams and preserves, and for every meal there was huckleberry pie or blueberry pudding. Then one evening at supper, Father said, "It's time Mother and I had a vacation. We're thinking of spending a week at Uncle Andrew's. Can you children take care of things and behave yourselves while we're gone?" "I'm sure Eliza Jane and Royal can look after the place for a week," Mother said, "with Alice and Almanzo to help them." Almanzo looked at Alice, and they both looked at Eliza Jane. Then they all looked at Father and said, "Yes, Father, we can." So the kids are all going to be on their own. That'll be interesting. Have you ever been by yourself with your brothers or sisters when your folks were gone? Or if you're grown up now, do you remember when you were by yourself? I remember lots of times because I was the oldest of the kids in my family that I would watch my brothers when my folks were gone. And that worked out just fine. Usually, although sometimes there was some mischief. I wonder what's going to happen with them. Well, we'll find out tomorrow. So it's Maria from Still Dreaming Homestead. I want to pray blessings on you and yours, in your house, and out of your house, in the day and the night. Whatever you do, keep dreaming. And if you enjoy this, please leave me a thumbs up and a comment. And if you know anybody else that might like it, please share it with them. All right. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.